So, you've been tasked with making a story in Minecraft. If not in Minecraft, then in real life, then you're trying to figure out the world building process for your settings and your characters, etc. I struggle with that too. I understand it. One of the reasons I started playing Minecraft was to learn how to story build, how to create things through the builds, through the characters, through the setting, etc. How do you do that effectively and efficiently? First of all, what do you have? What I have right now is this very basic Minecraft house, and it's okay. This is a good place to start. The problem is, it's boring. It doesn't tell me anything. You know what this build tells me? It tells me that I'd rather be watching Avatar: The Last Airbender again. So while yes, this can tell some sort of story, you can't tell what the story is just by looking at it. That is the most important thing when telling stories in Minecraft. Every detail, even the shape, the blocks that you use to build it, where it is, every single part of that needs to be intentional. Every single part of this build, in order to tell a story, must be purposeful. So how can we fix this? First of all, we need to make this thing more interesting. It is a boring, overused shape with a boring, overused palette that you see on every single Minecraft channel at one point in their career. I am no exception. Yes, this can be used in multiple different palettes with multiple different creative angles, etc. This is just not telling me anything. However, whatever we do to this house to make it more interesting has to stay within the theme of our story. Now, what is our story? Let's come up with some bullet points for our story. So let's say we have a character named, let's call him Theo. Now, Theo does not like color. He is an introvert and he likes to tinker with things, specifically machines. We have our color palette down just by making that list. These are going to determine what this house looks like. Since Theo does not like color, we cannot use the oak wood. Oak wood has yellow in it, so instead we're going to replace that with something else entirely. Let's do polished andesite for now, and maybe some plain old stone. Already this is telling me a lot more. There is no wood of any kind, which means that they either don't have access to the wood or they don't like it, which tells you a lot about their character. An added bonus to this is that we know that he is an engineer, which means that a stone building like this would likely be more practical for him, because if he were to work with anything flammable, if this were a wooden house, it would not end well. Now, what do we do about this shape that tells us even more about him? Well, we don't know anything about his environment yet. The shape of this house can tell us what time period he lives in and what the typical world building standards are for this place. What is Theo's environment? So I'm gonna say that Theo is from the 1900s, not that. Let's say there's a little bit of a fantasy element, or at least fantastical. So not necessarily mystical, but there's gonna be a little bit of whimsy in here. And I'm gonna say he doesn't live in a city. I'm gonna say he lives in a sparse town, which means that the houses are farther away from each other. We have our time period, we have our setting, and we have where he's gonna be living. So how can we easily show all of that through just the shape of the build? That is entirely up to your interpretation, but for my interpretation and how I see Theo, I'm gonna make it a shape that I believe would best suit his character. Okay, just by changing that shape, this tells me so much more than it did before. Got the curve representing the whimsy, but it's also more blocky in some places, and it has the flat roof, so it shows that he's more grounded and thoughtful. Not the whimsical kind of thoughtfulness, though, the practical kind of thoughtfulness. But it's so flat. There's hardly any texture, there's no details. I could probably barely even tell that this was a house if it weren't for the windows and the doors. How do we make this thing look more lived in? How do we know that a person lives in here? And most importantly, how do we know what kind of person lives in here? First, we're gonna need some pipes. And while going all gray would fit Theo's character, it isn't interesting. So we're going to go with more polished deep slate as a little bit of a contrast. Let's slap some pipes on here. There we go. We put one in front of the window, then it shows that he doesn't necessarily care for the natural light. Branch off of this section. Again, putting it in front of the window because he doesn't care for natural lighting. And it also shows that he likely put these pipes here himself. And then if they come off of his front porch here, like that, then it means that he doesn't necessarily care for people and how they perceive him. I'm gonna put one more over here. They don't necessarily look like pipes, but you know what I'm going for. So what would all of these pipes do exactly? Well, he's an engineer, so evidently they are carrying something or they fuel something. And since this is the 1900s, it would be within the steampunk era, which means that he could be using steam to power certain things or is expelling steam, but this is also fantastical. And this is a story within our control, so it doesn't necessarily have to fit within those rules or schemes or themes. So I'm going to say that these are carrying water, but where are they getting the water from? That's the biggest question that has to be answered. If you have a question about your stories, such as where is it, what is it for, it's always best to put that answer within the build. So I'm going to say he's getting the water from a pond over here. So we've got our source of water that's coming in. I added a few more details to the build, similar to the pipes. It's pretty much all you need just for the front of the build. Already this thing is telling so much more of a story than it was before. We have the tuff showing where the water has leaked through the pipes, and then we have some dynamic movement coming through because I waterlogged some stairs up here to add some dripping. Dynamic movement is a great way to start telling a story through your builds. So easy peasy way of doing that, especially with water. Just waterlog some stairs, and I put them up on the roof. I tried putting some in the walls, but you couldn't really quite see the drips quite as easily. Let me know if you guys spot any of the other details that I put in here to give you some hints about Theo and his character. So we're going to move on to the next portion of putting character into your build, and that will be the landscaping. Theo would not like landscaping. He is an introvert and he is an engineer. He won't like being outside quite as often. He will more likely be inside more often than outside, which means that it will likely be rather dead.
There we go. Easy peasy dead tree.
So I think we've gotten our point across about what kind of person Theo is. But there is one thing that we can add to this build that tells us so much more of his character. You can't help but stare at it. It's such a contrast to everything else because it looks so alive and bright and colorful next to all of this gray and dead and grungy. So what on earth could cause this kind of a person to have that growing in their front yard? Well, I haven't built it yet. Let's finish that. It always helps to ask questions as you're building. Like, is this their house? Are they renting it? Did they get it from a friend? Is this a house that they built? Or is it handed down to them by generation to generation? What part of this house have they attributed to? Have they added a lot of its character? Did they paint the roof? Did they put in some of these bricks? Were they there when it was built? Were they a kid when it was built? Even silly questions like, what's their favorite color? What's their favorite animal? What side would they be on in the Pokemon Generation Tournament? One that I always like to ask is, what is their hobbies? Because that greatly attributes to what they like to surround themselves with. One of the biggest questions you should ask yourself is, how long has this build been here? That greatly attributes to what materials you should use and where. For example, I'm using weathered copper here, and I'm using it on this section of the build specifically because this is where the garden is gonna go. So all of that water and the spraying the water on those plants will have chipped the brick and weathered the paint over years and years and years. Alright, let's see what we've learned so far. So we know that this is within the same universe because some of the materials are the same and it has that same wonky shape. It's also somewhat within the same time period because of the materials used and how the path and structure are created. But we also know for sure that those roses came from this house. Why? Because this house is surrounded by those roses. In fact, the vast majority of these flowers were intentionally roses because that point needs to get across. This is definitely where the roses came from. So what can we tell about this character? Well, we could tell that they, unlike Theo, love color because it is everywhere. Even in the dirt. The dirt was specifically chosen because it was more colorful than regular Minecraft dirt. We can also tell that this place has been here for a very long time because not only is the roof weathered, but the sides of the building are also weathered. You can also tell that it's been here a long time because of the vines, but it has intentionally been here a long time because they are flowering vines, not invasive vines. Invasive vines would probably look a little bit more like this. Yeah, you see how much darker that is compared to these? I've said it so many times before and I will continue to say it. Be intentional with your decor. That tells so much of the story. One of the things that you can tell from this one is that these people seem to be more inviting because the lights are on, which means that they're likely home. The chimney is going, which also means that they're likely home. And they have a doorbell, which means that they are okay with guests coming in. We didn't see that on Theo's house. Another thing that I like to do with my builds, specifically the ones that are telling a story, is to start with one thing and then add the other things on as if they were put on during the years. So the starting shape was the brick space that you guys saw before. The brick space was likely the first part of the build to go up. And then over the years, they added the prismarine roof. And then more recently, they would have added this wooden porch, but not quite so recently because as you can see, it's sort of falling apart just a little bit though. So again, with that dynamic movement, if you have shaders, you can see the flowers moving. If not, totally fine. For this one, an easy peasy way of adding dynamic movement are chimneys. Is that grammatically correct? I don't care. So what can we tell from this build that will tell us more about the build behind us? The most obvious thing is the roses. The roses that are now at Theo's place had to have come from here. Not only because it's the only build here, but also because it is the only build here with the roses. It's made even more obvious because their paths are connected to each other. So the biggest thing that we can learn from now knowing that context is that Theo seems to like the flower. Otherwise it would be gone by now. So what does that tell us about Theo? Well, seems that Theo has a little bit of a crush on his neighbor. Isn't that cute? And one more thing to add to this lesson, there is an easy peasy way of making this story from a romantic comedy into a tragedy. Let me show you. I hope you learned something today. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to go eat some food, drink some water, and go touch something outside. If you want to continue to see tutorials from me, please let me know down in the comments or by liking and subscribing. Let me know what you guys would like to learn from me, whether it be interiors, plot structure, how to make skins for characters, stuff like that. I would absolutely love to teach you guys, but I will only do it if you guys let me know. If you guys tell me, if you guys like the video, then maybe I'll try. We'll see. If this video gets 1,000 views, I will make another one. You guys are gonna have to let me know which one I'm gonna have to make. Do you guys want a plot structure video, an interiors video, or a shapes video? You have those 3 options. Thanks for choosing me to watch today. If this tutorial didn't help you, I hope you find the tutorial that you need. I will see you guys in the next episode. Bye! Love you! Happy storytelling! Oh, I'm so excited to see what you guys do.